Raider Nation. Thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Chucky's Thugs and now Betway. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Prom Dress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here sort of with Raider Homer and T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
Always ready to talk Raider football, to borrow a line from Raider Homer, who hopefully will be popping in with us later. Well, the Raiders won their opening game during Hall of Fame weekend. Cliff Branch is now forever a part of history, and we're going to talk about it on the Only Nation podcast.
And Raider Homer was there to witness it all.
Yes, he was.
Which is why he's not here right now, because he's still flying back.
And we hope by the time that you're listening to this, he's back home.
Yes. Safe and sound, snug as a bug.
Absolutely.
Today on the show, we'll talk about the Raiders game against Jacksonville. We'll talk about the current roster, both good and bad. And then we'll discuss what we'd like to see this week against the Miami Dolphins.
Okay, Raider Nation, here's how you can get in touch with us. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com.
Here's the latest Raider news.
The Raiders triumphed over the Jacksonville Jaguars by a score of 27-11 in Canton, Ohio last Thursday night during the Hall of Fame game. The defense pitched a first-half shutout. Josh Jacobs shined early, and Jarrett Stidham led the Raiders in the first half, going 8 for 15 for 96 yards.
And I don't know about you, Heidi, but I've heard lots of talk about Jarrett Stidham. I had a lot of high hopes for him coming into training camp, but I think he's pretty much asserted himself as the number 2 quarterback. Now, we'll see what Mullins has in the tank for the remainder of the preseason games. Of course, we're going to see a lot of Chase Garbers, I think. But I think we all agree that if Derek Carr should go down to injury, we are in trouble. I do like the fact that Jarrett Stidham has a lot of experience in the old New England offense, the old Josh McDaniels play calling offense, and he has established a comfort level. He looked good out there. He looked like he had command of everything. Now, granted that he wasn't playing with a lot of the starters that he had, but I think there's a chemistry that's forming with the team, and I think that if you can have in your backup quarterback somebody who is good and dependable that we can rely on and not have too much of a step back in case we need him, emergency break glass, I think we'll be in good shape. I was impressed with the defense, how they did in the first half. They did give up some plays in the second half. But again, you're talking about a lot of backups at that point. But there's a few things I did not see, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, I thought it was a really good performance and a good way to kick off the season.
It really was, and it was fun. We actually had a meeting of our club for a preseason game, so that was kind of cool. I don't know if they normally do that because most of our preseason games aren't aired nationally. So it was a lot of fun just to enjoy watching the game and to take some notes.
I have to admit, I did turn the sound down. I can't listen to Chris Collinsworth. I'm sorry. If he's listening to the podcast, he'll probably block me on Twitter and everything else, but I'm kind of tired of that.
Well, we were in the restaurant and we were not in the normal room where we watch. So the audio was pretty much non-existent. So we were just watching the screen. So it had the advantage of not having to hear Chris Collinsworth, but we also missed the introductions for Cliff Branch too. So it was good and not so good.
And I did play back the comments from Cliff's sister to the Hall of Fame ceremony. And if for all of the listeners out there, if you have not had a chance to go on YouTube and check out her speech, if you didn't hear it on Saturday, it was an excellent speech and a fitting tribute to a man who should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. I look at some of the names of people who've gotten in ahead of Cliff. It's just unconscionable, the fact that the Hall of Fame committee and voters overlooked him for so many years. But he's a part of history now. The family was able to share it. All of Raider Nation was able to drink it in. And I hope that's the first of many Raiders that we have coming up over the next several years.
He should have been able to share it with his family, though.
Absolutely.
Took him 37 years to put him in. 37.
And I was talking with a friend of mine within Raider Nation on the West Coast and said, if he hadn't died, that he might still not be.
That's true. That's true. Everyone hates a Raider if you're in the NFL.
Absolutely, they do.
Okay, let's talk about the game. What did we each see that was good and maybe not so good?
All right, you want to tackle this one first?
Well, what I saw that was good was the defense, actually. And I was pretty content with the defensive backfield. They seemed to actually be put together fairly well, and they alleviated some of my concerns. Obviously, it was the first preseason game with a lot of backups in there, but they looked good and definitely gave me some confidence for how they're going to play in the regular season. Thing that looked not so good and pretty dang scary is the offensive line. Brandon Parker looked absolutely horrible, and the rest of the line had moments where they didn't look much better. They are concerning me because the players that played, they were either close to being starters or the high-level reserves, the ones that are high in the rotational lineup. And, they weren't able to hold off the Jacksonville Jaguars very well. Our quarterback got swallowed up an awful lot, and that was not good to see.
Yeah, now the Jacksonville tag team tandem quarterbacks of Sloter and Luton. Sloter and Luton. So those are the two guys that were the.
Sounds like a cough drop.
It does, but they do not strike the fear into the hearts of many, and they showed it when they were on the field. Now, again, Jacksonville did play a lot of their starters, but again, these guys aren't going to go light it up. So the Raiders had the advantage of having to be faced with those guys. Now, let's talk about the good first of all. Now, this is a very talented running back room right now, and there are some talented guys who will not make this roster. And that's exactly what you want to see. Now, Josh Jacobs, despite what some of the so-called experts say, including Mike Florio, who put out a post this past week, and I think he's an absolute fool, who says that Josh Jacobs is the reason why they started him in the game is to put him up for trade. Now, he had a really good game. I was not surprised to see him start, if for nothing more than to knock off some of the rust. Now, he set the tone for the rest of the backs, and I don't think you're going to see much of Josh against Miami, if at all. He isn't going to be traded. You can take it to the bank from me right there. And I think you can still pencil him in as your week one starter. Now, as for the not so good, you already mentioned it. Our friend Brandon Parker did not have a good game. Now, granted, they had him playing on the left side in place of Colton Miller, but he simply has to do better. Now, there's a reason why he's a swing player instead of being a bona fide starter. With that having been said, I think it's necessary now for the Raiders to go out and sign another veteran free agent offensive line. Mr. Williams is still out there, I'm just saying.
And the other thing that we didn't really touch on is Jarrett Stidham. He was one of the good things. I thought that he was pretty comfortable in the offense. And like you said, the backup quarterback isn't somebody that's going to light up the scoreboard, but somebody who's consistent and that can provide a little bit of a backbone for the team in case we lose our starter. I think that he is establishing himself as somebody who can do that. So I was pretty happy with what I saw out of him as well.
And we'll see what the other two players are going to do as far as the quarterback room, because I think you're going to see a lot of both Mullins and Garbers in the next couple of weeks. Now, I have heard it said through a couple of other podcasts and content providers that Nick Mullins provides something different from Derek Carr. He's kind of like the alter ego, if you will, in terms of how he runs the offense. A little bit more of a gunslinger, a little bit more loose and freewheeling, which might actually turn out to be good if you want to bring somebody in to spell Derek Carr and have somebody who has a completely different look. If that's the case, Nick Mullins provides that. Plus, he does have some in-game experience anyway. Now, having said all that, right now, I would still rely on Stidham as the number 2 for right now. But let's see what happens over the course of the rest of the preseason.
All right, and let's see what's coming up against the Dolphins.
All right, I want to see sacks and I want to see turnovers. That's something we didn't see much of in game one. Now, offense, I'd like to see one long ball touchdown. They attempted to do that a couple times in the first game. It doesn't matter to me who who wins the game, but let's get out of there without any injuries. I was really concerned when Keelan Cole got that hit, and I thought, oh, Lord, here we go. Here's the beginning of all our injury woes. But fortunately, he got up and was able to shake it off. I'm interested and curious to see what both Nick Mullins and Chase Garbers can do and how long each one is going to play. I'm not sure that Stidham's going to get any game action against Miami. I'm pretty sure that Derek Carr won't unless they bring him in for just one series, but we'll wait and see. And Austin Walter, everybody's been talking about Austin Walter. Now, you know what? He could go crazy and score 5 touchdowns for the Raiders, but he still is only going to be a preseason story for this Raiders team. Tyron Johnson, T-Billy, he needs to be more consistent catching the ball. The defensive line and the linebackers need to really assert themselves. And this game is going to be a really good test of strength and conditioning in that South Florida heat and humidity.
Yeah, I want to see that defensive line make some push onto the quarterback. One of the things that has been an Achilles heel for the Raiders for many years now, and Peggy Holmes will tell you, she has been preaching it from the mountaintops for years now. We need a defensive tackle, one that makes the offense shake in their boots. You know, imagine if we had somebody like Aaron Donald. Could you just imagine that?
Like Peggy, I've been pounding the table for that for a lot of years. So she's absolutely spot on right. Maybe we can pick up a good first we can't pick up a first rounder next year unless we trade and get somebody as a first rounder back. But again, that we've got some young guys in there that could actually make some noise, and we got some guys that are coming back from injury too. So let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope that the young guys can produce and the injured guys can get healthy.
Yeah. And, the one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is the defensive ends. Those I have high hopes for. I really do. But it's the inside line itself that I'm concerned about. And I really would like to see what these other quarterbacks have to say and have to do on the field. Mullins did not look very good. I like Mullins. I want him to do well. But, he obviously was at least the third string at the Jaguars game. He did not put a lot of competition against Stidham at all. So I'd like to see Mullins a little bit more. I'd like to see him actually be able to move the ball. The offense really just stopped when he came in. So there's a lot of work that he needs to do. I do want to see the defensive line make a push. I want to see the defensive backfield continue to be impressive. And you're right, turnovers. I want to see turnovers, pressure on the offensive line, and knock some balls down defensive backfield. Grab those balls. I want to see that too. Long ball touchdown. That's a Raiders. That's just a Raiders trait. We've got to see that. In memory of Cliff Branch, we've got to see that long ball touchdown.
And I was happy that Josh put that play at the very beginning of the game, and he even said that he did that as a tribute to Cliff Branch. Now, the play wasn't executed the way that they intended. It was a completion, but ball kind of bounced around a little bit. But it would have been really nice to have seen that good long ball happen. I did see a couple of speed kill signs in the stands.
Yeah.
From what I saw, scanning the crowd on TV. But I'll tell you what, there were a lot of Raider fans in attendance, and you and I know this. And there is no other nation, only one nation. That's Raider Nation. That they showed up in mass, and I can't think of a better way for the 2022 season to have started.
The one thing I really liked to see was that it seemed like Josh McDaniels took the game hella seriously. Gruden, it was the preseason games were kind of annoyances for him. And McDaniels really, he made it look like it really counted. He took it seriously. All the players dressed out. Everyone was ready to go in if they needed to. And it was just a nice way of looking at the coach utilizing the opportunities that were given to the team.
And here's the one thing I'll say, and again, I was very vocal about the fact that when John Gruden came back, I was not real happy with the fact that he was given all the money, and I did not think that he would be successful like many other people thought he would. Now, having looked back on it, I think that he was the ideal pick because I think Mark Davis needed to hit a home run with the nation and hit a home run with somebody who was going to rev up the troops and get them really motivated to play and want to play. Now, Gruden could fire up a team and motivate them like nobody else. And I've heard somebody say that Gruden could deliver a stirring speech and make anybody want to run through a wall. Well, that's great. But once you get run through the wall and you break through the wall, what's next? I think a lot of the guys, when they would break through the wall for Gruden, they get through it and it's like, okay, well, everything else is kind of anticlimactic from there. Josh has built up some steady momentum for this team, and I think he has explained to them not only the do this, but here's why you do this. And I think that teaching and the explanations really have everybody on the team on the same page, which is what I like. Now, again, you can say what you want about processes, but I think that what makes this team a little different is that everybody sees that and everybody's willing to understand not only the terminology. And again, Gruden had some of the most difficult terminology and confusing terminology of all. So if you could get that down, that was one thing, but it was constantly changing. And I think it was confusing to the point where people really weren't confident in themselves. And likewise, they weren't confident in the person next to them. And I think that started to kind of fray. Now, we'll talk about this in the top three, but I really like the fact that Josh has established some fundamentals. He's established a process. He's explaining why to do things in addition to what to do. And I just really like what I'm seeing so far.
And speaking of which, how about we listen to that T3's top three?
T3's top three.
Okay, here is T3's top three. Number one thing I really liked was the up-tempo of the offense against Jacksonville. Plays were getting in quickly, and the quarterback had plenty of time to settle and look over the defense before executing the play. Now, we saw a lot of that in the first two games after Gruden was gone last year, and then things started to revert back to a more hectic and scattered setup, which resulted in a lot of false start penalties. Maybe this is the true beginning of a settled offense, better play calling, and better overall execution, and reduced penalties. Number two, Cleve Ferrell. I know I haven't given up hope on this young man, regardless of what anybody else says. I hope that Patrick Graham can light a fire under him, get him in the right frame of mind to find his role and establish his presence, whether it's as a starter or not. Now, I saw him play a lot while he was at Clemson, and I saw him thrive off the energy and success of his running mates. Now, if Max and Chandler and a couple of other guys on that front can smell success, I think Ferrell will have a bounce back year, and he might just end up being able to land a new contract with Raiders. And number three, Daniel Carlson looks like he is already in midseason form. That is great, great news. I have no problem with him being in a position to kick a couple of game-winning field goals this year against both the Chiefs and Chargers would be great. But I would rather see a whole lot of extra points this season and then a few critical field goals sprinkled in here and there. And that is this week's top three.
Well, I got to say, I have to agree with you on Daniel Carlson. He did look in mid-season form, and he looked sharp. The special teams battery for the Raiders, I'm very happy with. Daniel Carlson, A.G. Cole, Trent Sig, our friend Trent Sig.
Absolutely.
They all looked great. Cleve Ferrell, I want him to do well. I've liked him since when we first drafted him, and I want him to be successful. I'm hoping that he is able to have a bounce back year. I'm not sure that he will. I think that the Raiders coaching in the previous couple years have really done him a disservice. That's why I'm hoping under this new regime that he actually has a real shot, that they give him a shot, and also that he feels that fire lit underneath him and he responds to it. I think that the Raiders are in a position where that could really happen. And, prayers up, positive thoughts. You got this, Clee.
I really do have my fingers crossed for him this
year. Yeah. I like him. He's a good kid. He really is. And the offense against Jacksonville, I was just really happy to see it. It was in good shape, especially for a first preseason game. You could really see the Jaguars, they were struggling on offense, and they were struggling on the polished moves and, fumbling the snap, and they looked like they were struggling, but the Raiders offense looked like it was in pretty good shape. Johnson does need to learn how to catch, but if he can do that, he looks promising. But you know what? I'm reminded of a wide receiver that could not catch at the start of his career for the Raiders, and he was inducted into Canton a few days ago. So,
Now, we'll point out the only difference between that young man and Cliff Branch is Mr. T. Billy, as they call him, has been going through training camp saying, "Come on, throw me the ball. I can't throw it to myself." Listen, don't make a lot of noise if you're not going to go out and make plays. Now, Cliff settled in and worked really hard on his craft. He worked with some of the best, but he worked long after practices were over. He kept his head down, he kept his mouth shut, and he worked his ass off. And that's basically how he was able to move himself into a career. What a nice guy too. And you'll talk to people up one side and down the other. And I had the opportunity to actually meet him 2 or 3 times actually, and I got a chance to draw on the Hall of Fame rings like many people have had a chance to do. And I do have a picture of him, which I hopefully will share with you all at some point. But it was really nice to see him honored. But again, everybody else who has ever played wide receiver, with the exception of Tim Brown and a couple of others who came after him, could even be in the same room with him. So
yeah, and I am not comparing them. I am not comparing them at all. I'm just saying that
absolutely.
At the start of one's career, there have been some great ones that were pretty shaky at the start. So.
No, you're right. You're right. And he's got all the speed, not quite the speed that Cliff had, but very close to it. He just needs to work on his craft.
Yeah. All right. Give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we'll share your thoughts. What's coming up on Raider Roots in the next episode?
All right. So we hope to get this episode out this week. Maybe not, but the next episode is going to be a return to the year 2001. Now, the Raiders did make it to the playoffs. We end up ending that season against New England in a famous game, which is actually going to be its own Raider Roots episode. So the next episode is going to take us through the 2001 season, and the Raiders will finish up and make it back to the playoffs. A really, really good season despite the eventual outcome.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, and how about another segment of Did You Know?
All right, it's time for another episode of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and our entire listening audience a Raiders-related question with 3 multiple choice answers to choose from, so just give it your best guess. Here is this week's question. Of all the tight ends in Raiders history, Todd Christensen leads everyone with 461 receptions for 582 yards. Who is number 2 on the all-time list in terms of total yards gained? Is it A, Dave Casper? Is it B, Darren Waller? Or is it C, Raymond Chester? And I've given you a hint. Number 3 on the list actually has more catches than number 2.
How is that a hint?
Let you know that they're really close.
Well, yeah, they are very close.
I will let you know that Darren Waller is either number 2 or number 3.
Well, they all look very appealing, Dave Casper, obviously the legend, Darren Waller, the current star, and Raymond Chester, kind of the dark horse coming up at the end, and making a charge at the answer.
So who's number 2 in terms of total yards?
Total yards, I'll say Darren Waller, B.
Okay, the answer is A, Dave Casper. Darren Waller actually has more catches than Casper already. He's got 258 catches going into the season. Casper finished with 255. So Waller doesn't have quite the number of yards, but that will almost certainly pass this year. And he'd be number 2 on both. But right now, he's just behind Casper in terms of yardage.
Okay, you're so mean to me. Oh, well.
Yes, I tried to give you a little bit of a hint.
Next time, ask me, what year the Raiders were founded.
Yeah, the Raiders.
I can answer that.
The Raiders have 2 colors, silver and one other color.
That I could answer.
There we go. Maybe I'll keep that in mind for next episode's question.
There you go. Give me a little bit of confidence.
Gotcha. All right. And now, Raider Nation, it's time for a segment that Raider Homer came up with the name for, but that Heidi came up with the idea for. It's time for Heidis Heroes.
Thank you, T3. This week's Heidis Hero is a pretty incredible woman. It's an Irish woman named Debbie Deegan. Now let me read the story about Debbie and what she was able to do. She was able to reunite a Ukrainian grandmother and her best friend, Tasha, the lab. It's a great story. It's about a Ukrainian woman named Violetta and being reunited with her best friend, Tasha, the lab. Took 3,000 kilometers, 7 borders, and a 12-day journey separating them, but they were finally back together again. Debbie Deegan, what she did was she took an 86-year-old Ukrainian refugee who was devastated to be separated from her 13-year-old Labrador Tasha when she was rescued from the border of Romania, and she reunited them in Eau Claire. Debbie Deegan, who founded and you know what, for this alone, she deserves to be a Heidi's Hero, who founded the To Children with Love charity, which helped children in orphanages and in impoverished communities in Russia for 25 years. She helped coordinate the massive effort to bring the dog back to her owner, which concluded with a gorgeous moment when they were reunited. The Ukrainian grandmother was reunited with the lab that she feared she'd never see again. A while back, Debbie Deegan got a call from a Russian friend of hers in the U.S. Her friend said, "I have a Ukrainian family trying to get out of Ukraine. Can you help?" The family was made up of a grandmother, her son and his wife, and Tasha, the Labrador. The family and Tasha were stuck on the border of Romania due to issues with the grandmother's papers. She had never left Ukraine and didn't have a passport. Grandmother Violetta and her family started their journey in Odessa, which they left when the bombs started dropping. They made it to Molvoda via bus, where they were dropped in the middle of a field in a snowstorm. At that point, they started walking, but the grandmother, Violetta, was getting weaker, Debbie explains. They eventually got to a railway station which took them to the border of Romania. But at that point, Granny was giving up the will to live. She just couldn't walk any further. She was collapsing at that point, and her son and daughter-in-law had to carry her. It was at this point the decision was made to leave Tasha, Violetta's beloved 13-year-old Labrador, behind. We found a family in Romania who could take care of the dog for them, and at that point I organized a flight to Vienna and then they flew to Dublin. When Debbie went to Dublin Airport to meet them, she had prepared herself for an exhausted family. They were wrecked. They'd been traveling for about 12 days at that point, and the journey was horrendous. But what really struck Debbie was how clearly distressed Violetta was about leaving the dog behind. She was just devastated. She was distressed. It was like she had given up her child. I know a little bit of Russian, which means I understand Ukrainian, and it was all she could talk about. At that point, the family were bused to a hotel in the west of Ireland, where Debbie kept in touch. I was on to them every day, and she just wasn't recovering. She was crying every day asking for Tasha. I just thought to myself, I have to find this dog. Tasha's journey to Eau Claire started with Debbie reconnecting with the family in Romania who had taken in Tasha. First, we had to make sure she was chipped, vaccinated, and all that her papers were in order. Next, Debbie tracked down a dog moving company in Romania. Initially, I didn't have any faith in them. I had no idea who they were. The contract was all in Romanian. I didn't really know if I was doing the right thing. But we paid them and they got the dog as far as the UK. They had to come through about 7 borders with her before they got her into the UK. I couldn't get them to bring her as far as Ireland. In the meantime, Debbie had found an England-based Ukrainian group on Facebook. She posted into the group asking if anyone would be prepared to mind Tasha for a week. A woman called Lisa Kay, who is an honorable mention for a hero, who has 2 dogs of her own, obliged, and Tasha was picked up and spent the week with them. She had been spoiled rotten with them. Next, a friend of Debbie's, Waterford man John D'Arcy, hopped a ferry to the UK, where he traveled to Birmingham to pick up the beloved pooch. D'Arcy also fundraised to cover the cost of Tasha's journey to Clare. Debbie met Tasha in Galway, and then the dog made the final leg of her journey to Clare. Speaking after the reunion, Debbie said it was incredible to witness the moment when Violetta was reunited with Tasha. The second we opened the door, she said, trailing off with emotion. She just held on to the dog, and the dog was licking her face, and it was just gorgeous. An interpreter who was standing beside Violetta translated what the grandmother was saying over and over to the dog. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I had to leave you. I had no choice. Violetta and Tasha's story, which Debbie has been documenting on Twitter with the family's permission, struck a chord with many Irish people who have been waiting for the story to reach its conclusion. So many people sent cards to Violetta, Debbie said. The kindness has been overwhelming. It's been an amazing story of some good people doing good things, and it's blown up because it's some light in a very dark time. Debbie, everything that you've done with the children in orphanages, everything that you did with Tasha and Violetta, Debbie Deegan, that's what made you this week's Heidis Hero.
Excellent story. And, kind of choked up a little bit in terms of hearing it. So, Debbie, you are definitely our hero this week. And, of course, Heidi and I are both dog people, and there's lots of dog people that listen. And if you speak the language of dog, you speak the languages of both love and loyalty.
Absolutely. And that about does it for this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/onlynationpod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as at Kevlar Prom Dress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. And yes, I'm still kind of on my social media hiatus, so if you message me on there or tag me on there, it's still going to be a while till I respond. But with the season coming up, I'm starting to get back to it. I'm starting to get back. You can also find me when the season starts on YouTube on Captain Jack Rackham's channel every other Tuesday night. I joined the DC wench Peggy Holmes and Angria Trask on the Captain and His Wenches show.
And, of course, shout out to Captain Jack. I saw him all over the place at the Hall of Fame game on television and social media. So shout out to him as well. Raider Nation, even though it's the off season, keep up with us and we'll keep you up to date on all the Raiders comings and goings and all the games. Send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raiders swag and podcast stickers. Call us, tell us what you want to know. Throw us an interesting nugget that we can use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the Only Nation and we want you to be a part of it. So call us at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us now and join the Only Nation podcast family. And there are 2 easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as many of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, that's THOM Jones. I also want to thank you for your continued support of the Raider Roots podcast. Our next episode, as we mentioned, is going to go back to the year 2001, and the Raiders will finish up and return to the playoffs. And, of course, we have a special episode after that, which will be dedicated to that infamous game against New England.
As always, we look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, everyone, go Raiders.
We are not just a nation. Remember, we are the only nation.